Your mate is dead, and so is your place in this pack. I felt the words like claws across my chest as the last spade of earth thudded onto Alpha Dracon's grave. Rain soaked my hair, plastering my braids to my cheeks, turning the sacred stones into slick, treacherous teeth beneath my knees. Wildflowers, laid in trembling paws moments before, now lay crushed under the retreating feet of mourners eager to flee storm and sorrow. I stayed, fingers digging into the mud, unable to accept that the bond humming beneath my skin had fallen silent forever. Rise, Amira. The command came not from my mate but from his brother. When I looked up, Kael stood above me with the High Council at his back, their cloaks dark with rain and judgment. Your alpha is gone. A Luna without an alpha is nothing. My cloak was ripped from my shoulders. Rough hands seized my arms. I clutched at my chest where the mate bond mark still burned, the only proof I had ever belonged to him. Thunder split the sky as the great hall gates boomed shut behind me, and I was dragged past the territory markers Banished, before I ever knew the throne was mine. Dracon was a legend long before he became my mate. Warriors spoke of him in low, awed voices, the Alpha King who ended 3 generations of blood feud by offering his own throat in truce, daring rival packs to strike and doom them all to war forever. They had not expected mercy from a wolf like him, but Dracon understood that true fear is not in the strength of one warrior, but in the unity of many. To the world, he was steel and storm. To me, he was the quiet after battle. I first felt the bond in the training yard, long before I understood what it meant. I had come as an envoy from a minor border pack, a she-wolf with dust on her boots and no noble blood in her veins. He was sparring with 3 warriors at once, his movements a blur of muscle and controlled fury. When his gaze cut to me, everything inside me stilled. The noise, the clash of steel, the shouts, they all dropped away. My wolf rose so sharply I could not breathe, and in his eyes I saw the same shock, the same recognition. Not chosen by council, not arranged by bloodline, chosen by something older than law. Mine, he murmured later, when tradition finally allowed him to speak to me alone. He said it the way a starving man says the word bread. My answer was a whisper, but the bond roared between us like a river breaking its banks. From that moment, there was no negotiation, no courtship to appease the old families. The moon had chosen, and Dracon never learned how to bow. The High Council did not forgive the moon for that. They accepted me as Luna because they had no choice, but their smiles never reached their eyes. Cloaks heavy with embroidered crests, they sat in a semicircle around the throne and weighed every word I spoke as if searching for proof that I was unworthy. I was not born to their polished halls. My hands were calloused from bowstrings and healing herbs, not from rings and scrolls. They tolerated me because Dracon loved me, and because any challenge to our bond would have fractured the pack. Kael, Dracon's younger brother, hid his disdain less carefully. Born second, raised on the edges of power, he wore charm like a mask, one that slipped whenever he looked at me. I often caught his gaze lingering on our joined hands, on the way Dracon's thumb traced idle circles against my skin as if he needed constant confirmation that I was real. In councils, Kael stood at Dracon's right, always half a step behind, his suggestions wrapped in loyalty, yet sharpened with envy. You disarm them, Dracon told me once. When we were alone on the balcony, the valley spread out beneath us like a sleeping beast. They see a Luna without a famous name and think you are weak. I am, I said lightly. Weak enough to let you win at sparring. He huffed a rare laugh, the sound rumbling against my back as he drew me closer. You misunderstand me, Amira. They think you are weak. I know better. That is why they frighten me more than any enemy. In his final moons, something in him changed. He grew quieter, more watchful. Nights that once belonged to us spent tracing constellations from the balcony or listening to the wind through the pines became nights of whispered conversations behind closed doors. Garrett, his beta, came and went at strange hours, his expression grim, shoulders tight with secrets he could not share. I trusted them both, but the distance hurt like a stone in my chest. Often, I would wake in the darkness to find Dracon standing at the window, bare feet on cold stone, eyes fixed on the horizon as if he expected it to bite. Moonlight etched the scars along his arms, silver lines earned in the battles that had made him king. What hunts you? I asked him once, slipping my arms around his waist from behind. Nothing, he answered too quickly. Then, softer. Not yet. He began spending long hours in the sacred archives beneath the great hall, poring over brittle scrolls that smelled of dust and old blood. "Ancient pack law," he said when I asked. "Old promises. Old loopholes." I thought it was another of his attempts to protect the pack from threats I could not yet see. I did not understand that he was also trying to protect me. The night he gave me the silver cuff bracelet, we were alone in our chamber. The fire had burned low, shadows licking the walls. He held the cuff as if it were something fragile, not shaped from hammered moon steel and engraved with our interlocked bond marks. "If I fall," he said, fastening it around my wrist, "this will speak for me when I cannot." I frowned, the words chilling. "You are not going to fall. Every alpha falls," he replied quietly. "What matters is what rises after." I wanted to argue, to snatch the cuff off and throw it into the fire, but the mate bond thrummed with his fear, and that scared me more than any prophecy. Dracon did not fear easily. I kissed his palm instead, pressing my wrist into his hand so he could feel the metal he had given me. "Then I will rise," I whispered, "if you command it." He flinched at the word command. "No, you rise because you are Amira. Promise me." I promised. I did not know I was swearing an oath over his grave. Days later, he left for what the council called a routine border patrol, a simple show of strength along the disputed ridge where rogues had been sighted. Garrett rode at his side. Kale remained behind to advise the council, citing the need for continuity and leadership should anything happen. I kissed Dracon before he mounted, tasting iron at the back of my throat, a warning I could not name. The patrol was due back by dusk. They returned at midnight, with only half their number, and a shrouded body lashed across a horse. I remember fragments more than details. The copper stench of blood, the low keening of the warriors who carried him, the way the world narrowed to the outline of his shoulders beneath the blood-soaked cloak. The council said it was an ambush, that rogues had sprung from the rocks and dragged him from the ridge. Garrett was nowhere in sight sent, they claimed, to chase the fleeing attackers. Dracon's throat was torn out. No last words, no final command, just silence. Grief is a kind of drowning. I surfaced only long enough to stand at his burial stones, to feel the rain on my face and the mud beneath my knees. When the last earth fell, and the mourners began to drift away, KL stepped forward, his cloak billowing like a shadow. "Pack of Silvercrest," he called, voice ringing through the storm. "Our king has fallen, and the moon has left us without heir." I looked up sharply. Without heir, as if my womb, my worth, were on trial beside my mate's body. He continued before I could speak, reciting an obscure clause from pack law, twisting old words into a noose around my neck. A Luna without an heir, he claimed, could not sit the throne. The pack needed strength, a male of Dracon's blood to lead them through the coming storms. The council, long resentful of my presence, nodded as one. They had been waiting for this. Perhaps they had helped shape it. When I protested, when I said the bond made me more than ornament, Kale's hand whipped across my face. The crack of it echoed louder than thunder. Gasps, then silence. "Look how the moon's chosen speaks against law," he sneered. "She has brought barrenness to our blood and curse to our hunting grounds. From this moment, Amira is Omega. She leaves our borders before the next moonrise." No one stepped forward to stop him. Garrett, my one sure ally, was conveniently absent on some distant mission only KL and the council had ordered. By the time the storm cleared, I was no longer Luna. I was prey. Exile does not happen all at once. It happens in the space between one breath and the next. When you step past the last marker stone and realize there is no pack song behind you, only wind. The first night, I did not look back. My legs carried me until they failed, until the great pines thinned and jagged rock rose from the earth like broken fangs. I found a shallow cave in the hillside and crawled inside, fingers numb, jaw locked against the sob clawing its way up my throat. The storm followed me, shoving rain in through the narrow opening, turning the floor to cold mud. I curled against the stone and wrapped my arms around my ribs, as if I could hold myself together by force alone. That was when the phantom pain began. The mate bond had always been a steady, living thread in my chest. Dracon's presence, a constant warmth, even when he was miles away. Now it burned and twisted as if some cruel hand were sawing it in half, leaving raw edges scraping inside my ribs. Every breath felt wrong, as though my lungs were pulling in air that no longer belonged to me. "Stop," I whispered into the darkness, palms pressed flat against the stone. "Please, if you are gone, let it end." It did not. The bond remained, wounded and howling, a reminder that somewhere beneath the earth, Drakon's body lay still, while our connection refused to die. Sleep came in jagged scraps, broken by nightmares of Kale's hand striking my face and the council's cold eyes watching me fall. In my dreams, Drakon reached for me, but his fingers dissolved into dirt before they touched mine. By the third night, hunger gnawed louder than grief. I left the caves, moving through the trees with the jittery caution of prey. Beyond Silvercrest's borders, the world changed. Our scent markers faded, replaced by the sour tang of rogues and the metallic stink of human steel. Branches creaked overhead like warning bones. I kept to the shadows, listening for the wrong sound, a snapped twig, a breath drawn too close. Twice, I scented bands of rogues, packs without law who followed only hunger. Once, I heard the tin rattle of a bandit's coin pouch and the low murmur of men arguing over spoils. I pressed myself into thorn thickets or shallow ditches and waited, barely breathing, until danger passed. Without a pack at my back, I was nothing but a lone she-wolf with a wounded heart and no right to claim any territory. By the time I stumbled into neutral lands, my boots were split and my cloak hung in ragged strips. A weather-worn sign creaked above a squat stone building, its paint long since faded, but the antlers carved into the wood were clear enough. The broken antler. Laughter and firelight spilled from the open door. The smell of roasting meat hit me like a physical blow. My stomach cramped. For a wild moment, I considered turning away pride, snarling that I would not crawl, that I would rather starve than beg. Then Drakon's voice rose unbidden in my memory. "Strength is knowing when to fight and when to live." I stepped inside. The tavern was a rough place, the kind of den where neutral wolves and humans rubbed shoulders because coin could tame suspicion for a night. A fire roared in the hearth. Tables were crowded with traders, mercenaries, and the occasional cloaked figure who watched everything while pretending to see nothing. Conversations dipped as I entered. Strangers always draw eyes, especially those wearing grief like ill-fitting armor. Behind the scarred counter stood an old wolf with thick gray hair braided close to his scalp. His eyes flicked over me once-torn cloak, mud-stained boots, the way my hand hovered unconsciously near the sleeve that hid my bond mark. "Looking for trouble, girl?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. "Work," I answered, forcing my chin up. "I can scrub, pour, carry. I'll sleep in the stables. I just need food." He studied me for a long breath, gaze lingering on the shadows under my eyes, the way I swayed on my feet. Then he jerked his head toward the back. "Tankards don't clean themselves. You break more than you wash, you're gone. No questions, no names." Relief hit so hard my knees almost buckled. Understood. True to his word, he asked nothing. I became hands in motion, filling jugs, wiping tables, mopping spilled ale while the tavern roared around me. At night, when the last patron staggered out and the older girls claimed the warmest pallets near the hearth, I climbed the ladder to the hayloft above the stable. There, among the steady breathing of horses and the scent of straw, I lay on my back and stared at the beams until exhaustion dragged my eyes shut. The mate bond pulsed dully, like a wound scabbing over. I kept my left wrist wrapped in cloth, hiding the silver cuff Drakon had given me and the mark beneath it. In places like the broken antler, a bond mark without a mate drew the wrong sort of attention, pity at best, hunger at worst. I learned quickly to speak little, laugh less, and let others assume I was just another abandoned she-wolf who had outlived her usefulness. Some nights, kindness slipped through the cracks. A merchant's wife pressed an extra heel of bread into my hand with a murmured, "You remind me of my eldest." A traveling bard taught me how to listen for lies in a man's voice, payment for refilling his cup without watering it. Once, when a drunk soldier grabbed my wrist and tried to pull me into his lap, the tavern keeper appeared with a cudgel in hand. "She serves drink, not you," he growled, knuckles whitening around the wood. "Touch her again and I'll serve your teeth to the pigs." The soldier let go. I met the old wolf's gaze, searching for questions, recognition, anything. He merely grunted and went back to his ledger, as if defending broken things was part of the job. I was grateful for his silence. Silence let me disappear. While I scrubbed and carried and learned the rhythm of neutral territory, life in Silvercrest moved on without me. News traveled on the tongues of traders and messengers who passed through the broken antler, never realizing whose ears their words reached. "New Alpha's wasting no time," a peddler muttered one evening. "Raised taxes on the border farms. Says he needs coin for defenses. He spends more nights feasting than patrolling," another replied. "Council likes him, though. Easier to steer than his brother." They spoke Kale's name with cautious respect, but not with love. The pack song carried notes of unease now, trembling in the edges of their stories. Sometimes, snippets cut deeper. "Shame about the Luna," a merchant sighed over his drink. "Pretty thing. Heard she went mad from grief. Ran into the woods and never came back." I swallowed ashes and kept wiping the table. If I corrected every lie, I would never stop bleeding. Not everyone believed the tales. Old Marin, the healer who had bound mine and Draken's hands beneath the full moon, began appearing in those whispered accounts, quietly refusing to burn the records of my mating, asking too many questions about the patrol that had killed our king, insisting that wounds on Dracon's body did not match the council's version of events. "She'll get herself cast out if she's not careful," someone said. "She's too useful to banish," came the answer. "Sick pups die without her. Even Kale knows that." The knowledge that Marin still spoke my name even in secret was a small flame in the dark. I fed it with every scrap of rumor I overheard, piecing together a picture of a pack stretched thin under new, careless rule. Months slid by like water over stone. I grew stronger in my exile body hardening with labor, grief settling into something sharp and quiet instead of raw and all-consuming. I still woke some nights with my hand pressed to my chest, certain I had heard Draken's voice in the creak of the rafters, but the panicked edge dulled. I learned to carry my pain and my tray in the same hands. Then, one evening, a familiar scent cut through the haze of smoke and ale, pine, steel, and the faint trace of the peppermint leaves Drakon used to chew before long councils. Garrett. I almost dropped the tankards. He sat at a corner table, cloak drawn low, eyes scanning the room with a predator's patience. There were new scars along his jaw, and weariness in the set of his shoulders, but the loyalty in his gaze when it finally found mine was unchanged. He went very still. In that moment, with the tavern roaring around us and my heart pounding loud enough to drown it all, I knew two things as surely as I knew my own name. Kale sat on a stolen throne, and the life I had built in the shadows of the broken antler was about to end. Garrett did not speak to me that first night. He finished his drink in silence, eyes never fully leaving me, then disappeared into the storm like a ghost shaken from old bones. I told myself I had imagined him, that grief was finally cracking my mind open. But the next evening, when I slipped out to the well behind the tavern, he was waiting in the shadows, cloak soaked, hood thrown back so I could see his face. "Luna," he said softly. The word broke something in me. No one had called me that since the day I was cast out. For a heartbeat, I wanted to run into his arms like a pup, to bury my face against his chest and pretend Drakon still stood somewhere behind him, amused by my tears. Instead, I wrapped my fingers around the bucket rope and forced my voice steady. "Do not call me that. Not here." He stepped closer, the scent of pine and steel wrapping around me, achingly familiar. New lines cut across his brow, and there was a hollowness in his eyes that had not been there before. "I searched half the continent for you," Garrett murmured. "You do not get to forbid me one word." My throat tightened. "Why?" I asked. Kale said I ran mad into the woods. "You could have believed him and gone on serving your new king." His jaw clenched at the word king. "Kale is my alpha by law," he said. "Drakon is my alpha by blood and bone. I swore an oath to protect what he loved. You were not at the hall. You were not at the borders. So I followed rumors of a she-wolf with grief in her eyes and a mark she never showed." "How long?" I whispered. "Since the day I returned and found your scent gone," he replied. "Since I saw Kael on the throne with the council smiling like carrion birds. Since Marin took my hands and said, 'Find her, Garrett, before they erase her completely.'" The well creaked between us. The wind tugged at my hair, lifting wet strands from my cheeks. Part of me wanted to step back, to keep the fragile distance I had built between myself and the life I had lost. The rest of me was bone-deep tired of standing alone. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, "but I have something that belongs to you." He reached beneath his cloak and drew out a leather-wrapped bundle bound with a thread of silver. My wolf surged at the sight of it, recognition snapping through the mate bond like lightning. My hands shook as I took it. The knot loosened under my fingers, as if it had been waiting for me alone. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, edges worn, sealed with the deep red wax of the Alpha's crest. My knees nearly gave way. "You should not have this," I breathed. "If Kael knew, he would try to kill me," Garrett said simply. Again. I stared at him. He gave a humorless smile. He already sent me on patrols he hoped I would not return from. Wolves loyal to him, not to Drakon, at my back. Accidents waiting to happen. He fears what I know. "What do you know?" I asked, though part of me already understood. "That Drakon saw his death coming," Garrett said, "and he planned for it." The words scraped through me. I sank to the low stone wall by the well and broke the seal. "Amira, if you are reading this through Garrett, then I am gone, and Kael has moved against you. Do not believe it was accident. The ambush I fear will carry my body home, but not the truth." The letters blurred for a moment. I blinked hard and forced my eyes to keep moving. "The succession decree I filed is sealed in the sacred vault, beneath the old hall where Pack Law sleeps. The council will tell you that bloodline demands my brother take the throne. They will be wrong. I have invoked the right of chosen succession. By that law, my mate inherits all authority in the absence of a direct heir. They will hide this. They will call it heresy. They will say you are unfit. Remember this. The moon chose you before I did. Your mate bond mark is the key. I asked the runekeeper to encode the vault's seal into your bond, woven into flesh and spirit. No hand but yours can open it. Trust Garrett. Trust yourself. Trust what I always saw in you. Lead them better than I have, little wolf. R.D. The world narrowed to the ink of his final letter and the echo of his voice in my head. Little wolf. He had called me that only in our most private moments, in the quiet between battles, in the soft darkness after love. I did not realize I was crying until a tear fell onto the parchment, blurring the last stroke of his name. Garrett knelt in the mud at my feet, as he had knelt the first day Drakon presented me to the pack as Luna. His head bowed, his fist pressed to his heart. "My Alpha," he said. I flinched. "No. I am nothing. I scrub tankards and sleep in hay. I have no pack." "You have mine," he said fiercely. "And you have his. Law does not vanish because Kael wishes it so. Drakon bound his will to parchment and magic. He chose you, not only as mate but as heir." I stared at the silver cuff on my wrist, suddenly aware of its weight in a new way. My fingers found the edge of the engraved bond mark, tracing the lines Drakon had pressed there himself. "It is only a mark," I said weakly. "Marks are how we survive," Garrett replied. "Scent marks, territory lines, scars." The runekeeper told Drakon the vault would answer to living flesh better than metal. Your bond was the strongest thing he knew. He trusted it more than the council, more than bloodline, more than me. A bitter laugh tore out of me. And look how well that trust served him. He is in the ground. I am hiding behind tavern walls. Kael sits on his throne. Garrett's gaze hardened. For now, silence stretched between us, filled with the crackle of distant hearthfire and the soft snorts of the tavern horses settling for the night. Somewhere inside, a drunk shouted for another round. The world went on, deaf to the storm building in a forgotten corner of neutral land. "What would you have me do?" I asked at last. "March into Silvercrest alone and demand the throne? Kael would have my head before I crossed the first marker." "I would have you remember who you are," Garrett said, "and then move like it." He rose, brushing mud from his knees. "We cannot go at him openly. Not yet. Kael has the council and the guard. He has twisted the laws to his word. But he cannot rewrite what is sealed in the vault. He cannot unbind what the runes recognize." His eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "We gather proof. We find allies who still honor Drakon. We learn which wolves grumble in private but bow in public. And when we are ready, we use your mark to open the vault and drag the truth into the light where even Kael cannot deny it." Fear coiled cold and tight in my gut. "If he discovers any of this, he will hunt us," Garrett finished. "He already hunts you in rumor. Better to be hunted for the truth than haunted by it. I looked down at Draken's letter, at the lines written in his strong, familiar hand. I could almost see him hunched over the desk in his private study, candlelight throwing shadows across his face as he shaped each word, knowing he might never speak them aloud to me. Lead them better than I have, little wolf. I had spent moons surviving, shrinking myself until I could fit in the cracks of the world. The idea of stepping into the open again to claim not just a name but a throne felt impossible. Arrogant. Dangerous. But Draken had trusted me with more than his heart. He had trusted me with his pack. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest, over the bond mark that still burned faintly beneath skin and silver. All right, I whispered. Tell me what we need. Garrett's smile was grim and relieved all at once. First, he said, we vanish from Kale's sight. He has spies in every neutral den. We will be ghosts until the moment we choose to be seen. And after that? I asked. After that, he replied, eyes alight with something that looked very much like hope. We remind Silvercrest who their true alpha is. We left the broken antler before dawn, slipping away while the sky was still the color of bruised bone. Garrett paid my owed wages in silence and thanked the tavern keeper for the girl's service, as if I were nothing more than a passing scullery maid. The old wolf only nodded, gaze lingering a moment too long on the way Garrett walked half a step behind me, as if guarding something valuable. If he guessed what I was, he kept it buried beneath his usual grunt. Once we were beyond the last hut, Garrett handed me a cloak lined with wolf fur and a pair of sturdy boots that fit too well to be coincidence. You planned this, I said, tugging the cloak tight against the bite of morning air. I hoped for it, he answered. Planning implies I believed the moon would be kind. We traveled like shadows, taking deer paths instead of roads, drinking from streams, sleeping beneath overturned roots, and in abandoned shepherd huts. Garrett moved as if every tree might hold a listening ear. At first I thought it was paranoia. Kale could not possibly stretch his reach this far. Then we found the first corpse. He hung from an oak, a young wolf I recognized only by the tattoo along his forearm, the crest of Draken's personal guard. His throat had been cut clean. No teeth, no claws. Human steel. Pinned to his chest with a hunting knife was a strip of hide marked with a single symbol, the stylized crescent the council used to sign old decrees. My stomach lurched. Council punishment? Garrett's jaw tightened. Council message. To anyone still loyal to Drakon. We buried the guard beneath the oak and said nothing else until nightfall. Our first allies waited in a ruined watchtower near the old eastern border, a half-collapsed spine of stone overlooking the valley. 3 wolves rose as we approached, the glint of drawn blades catching moonlight. For a breath, I saw only threat. Then one of them stepped forward, lowering his hood. Luna, he said, voice rough with disbelief. It was Joran, a scarred warrior who had once taught me how to disarm a larger opponent using their own weight. He had patted my shoulder after my first successful throw and said, "Only fools underestimate the small." Now he bowed, fist over heart. The others followed. I am no Luna, I began, but Garrett's glance cut me off. Drakon's right makes her more than Luna, he said. You'll hear the details in time. For now, we speak only to those who served him, not Kale. We sat around a small, smokeless fire, sharing hard bread and stronger memories. Joran and his companions spoke of changes since my exile. Border patrols thinned while Kale spent more nights feasting with the council. Tribute demanded from poor farmers to fund defenses that never appeared. Marin's concerns about sick pups dismissed as women's nerves. And the patrol? Garrett asked quietly. The one that brought Draken home. Silence settled, heavy and bitter. I was meant to ride that day, Joran said at last. Kale ordered me to remain behind, said he required me at his side for a council session. I thought it strange Drakon preferred me on the ridge. When the patrol returned without you. Without him. He shook his head. The wounds did not match the story. No tracks where there should have been. Claw marks on his back, blade wounds on his front, an ambush from both sides, not a wild attack. Rogues? I asked. Rogues do not carry steel, Joran replied. Nor do they strike once and flee. They tear, they feed. This was killing, not hunger. Each meeting after that followed a similar pattern, wolves loyal to Drakon, emerging from shadows, sharing pieces of a puzzle that had always been there, if one cared to look, territory ceded to Kale's former allies without counsel, old oaths broken in private, wolves who questioned too loudly reassigned to distant outposts or lost in sudden accidents. We recorded everything. By firelight, Garrett scratched names, dates, and details onto thin strips of parchment, coded so that only we and a handful of trusted wolves could read them. I added my own observations, memories of Draken's unease, phrases from Kale's speeches that now sounded like rehearsed justification. As our network grew, so did Kale's fear. New Alpha sleeps with guards at his door now, one messenger reported, breathless from the speed of his run. Flogged a stable boy for dropping his wine, blamed hidden traitors for a poor hunting season. Traitors, another scoffed. Or poisoned fields. Marin swears the soil reeks of iron and bitter root. She says no natural blight spread so neatly along the borders of packs that refused his alliance. We journeyed to the sanctuary Drakon had built during more hopeful years. A cluster of stone buildings nestled in a hollow, where mist clung even at midday. Orphaned pups tumbled in the courtyard, their laughter jarring against the weight of our purpose. When they saw me, some hesitated, as if trying to fit my older, worn face to the younger Luna, who had once knelt in the dust to bandage their scraped knees. One bold girl marched up, hands on thin hips. "You used to bring honey cakes," she accused. A laugh caught in my throat, half sob. "I used to steal them from the kitchens," I corrected. "The cook has sharper teeth than any alpha." Her eyes softened. I remember. The sanctuary's matron, a wiry she-wolf named Branna, led us into her office and bolted the door. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "Kale's men have ridden past twice this week. They ask too many questions about visitors." "And what do you tell them?" Garrett asked. "That we have no use for kings who forget their weakest," she snapped. Drakon remembered. "Kale sends coin, but no eyes, no ears. We could starve and he would only notice when the song of our thanks went silent." She opened a chest and drew out a bundle of scrolls. "Marin sent these," Branna said, pressing them into my hands. "Records she refused to burn when the council ordered all mention of your mating destroyed. And something else, a report she found buried under old harvest tallies." The report was short and chilling. Traces of nightshade and ground iron found in the soil of the main hunting grounds, concentrated near the stream where the deer came to drink. Not a curse, a poisoning. "Who signed this?" I asked. Branna tapped the bottom of the parchment. There, in cramped script, were the names of 2 junior council scribes, and above them, the flowing signature of Councillor Varen, one of Kale's loudest supporters. "The same hand that declared you a curse," Garrett murmured. Rage rose in me, hot and clean. All those hungry winters blamed on barren moonlight and my supposed failure, when the rot had come from the council's own hand. They had starved our people to make my banishment seem necessary, to weaken Drakon's rule, to justify Kale's rise. We left the sanctuary with more than scrolls. We left with quiet pledges. Wolves whose lives Drakon had saved runaways he had refused to return to abusive packs. Pups he had taken in when their parents fell in border wars swore themselves to me in hushed vows under the sanctuary's archways. "Not because you are his mate," Branna said, gripping my forearm, "but because you walked these halls when no one watched. Kale sends coin. You sent yourself." News of our movements reached Kale faster than we liked. Within weeks, traders brought reports of proclamations, read in village squares. Amira, former Luna, declared a deserter who had abandoned her duties and fled with the beta Garrett, seducing him away from his rightful alpha. My name became a curse, whispered to frightened disobedient pups. A barren Luna, a mad widow, a wolf who led males astray. "Creative," Garrett said dryly, tossing one such proclamation into a stream. "He always did have an imagination." "He is afraid," I answered, though the words stung. "If he must paint us as monsters, it is because he fears we are something worse." "Truth," Garrett agreed. "Truth is far more dangerous." We knew we could not remain stories and shadows forever. To challenge Kale under pack law, we needed more than whispers and poisoned soil. We needed the weight of other alphas behind us. So Garrett prepared the challenge notice's formal scrolls edged in red, invoking ancient clauses many had forgotten. Some had hoped never to hear again. They did not name me outright. Not yet. They spoke of disputed succession, of ignored rights, of a vault sealed against rightful eyes. Each scroll carried Garrett's crest, and a single, simple line at the bottom. For the honor of Draken Silvercrest, I request witness. We are inviting them into a storm, I said as he tied the last scroll with waxed cord. They have been standing in its path for moons, he replied. We are only pointing out the clouds. Messengers raced across the territories. Some alphas answered with cautious interest, others with silence. A few, those who had most to gain from Kale's favor, sent their replies straight to Silvercrest instead. Not long after, fresh proclamations appeared on tavern walls and village posts, written in Kale's polished hand. Garrett, traitor Beta, accused of plotting rebellion with a weak, barren Luna, who had fled her duties. A reward offered for information, double that for our heads. I traced the ink with a fingertip, marveling at the neatness of the lie. Barren, I murmured. Mad, traitor. Is there any sin he has not gifted me? Garrett's hand closed gently over mine, pulling it away from the parchment before I could tear it down. He forgets something important, he said. All his words are written on walls he does not own, in taverns where Draken once drank, in villages where you once knelt to help a child with a broken bone. He thinks he can command memory with ink. And he cannot? I asked. No, Garrett said, eyes steady. Memory answers to deeds. As we walked away, I heard a farmer spit on Kale's proclamation and mutter, Say what you like about the Luna, at least she listened when we spoke. Another voice answered, Careful. Walls have ears, the first snorted. Then let them hear. Our network was no longer a handful of loyal wolves whispering in ruins. It was a web, thin in places, fragile in others, but spreading, stretching, touching more lives than Kale could comfortably ignore. We were not ready yet. The vault remained sealed. The proof of my succession still slept in the dark. But for the first time since I had been dragged past the territory markers, I felt something stirring beneath my ribs alongside grief and anger. It was not hope. Hope was too soft a word. It was readiness. We crossed back into Silvercrest under a moon so thin it looked like a scar. Garrett led, as he always had on patrol, but his steps were quieter now, more careful. The air smelled of home and threat, pine and stone, and the faint metallic tang of the wards Kale had strengthened along the borders. Once, these markers had recognized me as Luna, humming faintly against my skin when I passed. Tonight, they lay dead and cold, answering only to the new alpha's scent. Stay close, Garrett murmured. Some of the old paths still remember Drakon, the rest remember me. We slipped through gullies and over deer tracks, keeping low whenever the wind carried the murmur of guard patrols. In the distance, the great hall's torches burned against the dark, like watching eyes. I forced myself not to look at them for long. That throne was not my goal tonight. Not yet. Our destination lay beneath the bones of an older Silvercrest. The ruins crouched in a hollow north of the main keep, where moss-covered stones marked the foundations of a hall that had burned long before my birth. Draken had brought me here only once, early in our mating. He'd traced the fallen pillars with reverent fingers while telling me stories of alphas who had ruled before pack law was written, when oaths were sealed only in blood and teeth. Back then, he had said, a leader's word died with him. Now it can outlive us all if we let it. Tonight, his words felt less like history and more like instruction. The entrance to the vault was a slab of black stone half buried beneath collapsed masonry, runes carved in a circle around its edge. To anyone else, it was just another piece of ruin. To those who knew where to look, it was the heart of Silvercrest, where every treaty, every law, every sealed promise slept in darkness. Garrett brushed fallen leaves aside, revealing the faint shimmer of wards. This is where we see whether your mate trusted the right wolves, he said quietly. Or whether I am about to slam my wrist into a very stubborn rock, I muttered, though my voice shook. The silver cuff felt heavy around my arm, as if it too were waiting. I knelt before the stone, rolled up my sleeve, and pressed the inside of my wrist, bond mark and cuff both into the center of the rune circle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world inhaled. Cold fire shot up my arm, searing and sweet, like the moment the mate bond had first snapped into place. The runes flared silver, light spilling along the carved lines in sudden, blinding brilliance. I gasped as the bond inside my chest answered, flaring in echo, as if Dracon himself had reached through time to grip my heart. "Dracon?" I whispered. The stone shuddered beneath my hand. Dust rained from the ceiling as ancient mechanisms, sealed for years, ground into motion. With a deep, echoing groan, the slab split down the middle and slid aside, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into darkness. Garrett let out a breath I suspected he had been holding since we left neutral territory. "Only you," he said. "Not Kale. Not the council. Just you. Just us," I corrected quietly. "Dracon and I." He left the key in me. We descended with a single shuttered lantern, its light barely enough to chase the shadows from the stone steps. The air grew cooler, heavy with the smell of parchment and old wax. At the bottom lay a chamber carved directly into the rock, its walls lined with shelves. Scrolls and ledgers rested in neat rows, some so old their bindings looked ready to crumble at a touch. Garrett moved with the confidence of a wolf who had been here before. "Dracon brought me down once," he said. "Told me that if the day ever came when he could not speak for himself, the vault would. He did not tell me he had tied it to you. That part he kept close. He always kept the most dangerous things close," I said. "I just never thought one of them was me." In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal. Upon it waited a single sealed scroll, bound with red string and bearing Dracon's crest in unbroken wax. Beside it lay a thinner bundle of parchments and a small wooden box etched with the runekeeper's mark. My fingers trembled as I reached for the scroll. "This is it." Garrett nodded once. "Read it." The wax broke with a soft crack. I unrolled the scroll carefully, the formal script of pack law stark and uncompromising. "By the authority of the Alpha King of Silvercrest, Dracon, son of Eryx, bound in blood and bond to Luna Amira of the border pack Orin, in the event of my death without living heir of my body, all authority, titles, and responsibilities shall pass to my mate, Amira, through the right of chosen succession. Her claim shall stand above bloodline, above council vote, and above the ambitions of any who would seek the throne through my kinship alone. She is Alpha by my word, by the will of the moon that bound us, and by the ancient right that places bond above birth. Witnessed under full moon by Marin, healer of Silvercrest. Tavian, elder of the First Circle. Elda, elder of the First Circle. All three names were followed by signatures I knew too well. Marin's neat, precise script. Tavian's broad, looping strokes. Elda's careful, shaky hand. All three elders had stepped down in the weeks before Dracon's death, one to a distant outpost, two to quiet retirement. Silenced, I thought, staring at their names. Not gone, removed. "It is enough," Garrett said, voice hoarse. "With this, he cannot claim ignorance. Kyle knew, or he chose not to know. Either way, he has no lawful right to sit where he sits." "There is more," I said, nodding toward the bundle and the box. The loose parchments were reports, copies of the evidence we had begun gathering on our own, only older. Notes about unusual movements among rogues near the eastern ridge. Lists of supplies unaccounted for in the armory. An observation written in Dracon's own hand that turned my blood to ice. Kale absent from 3 consecutive ridge patrols. Requests to accompany me diverted by council under pretext of domestic matters. Unacceptable pattern. He had seen it. He had known Kale was maneuvering even before I did. The wooden box contained a smaller scroll, sealed with the runekeeper's sigil. Inside, in cramped, ink-spattered handwriting, lay the explanation for the fire that had leapt along my skin when I touched the vault. As requested by Alpha Dracon, the mate bond mark borne by Luna Amira has been bound to the vault's warding sequence. Only her living presence may unlock the primary seal. Any attempt to alter or override this bond will collapse the wards and render the vault inaccessible for a generation. This measure is irreversible. Dracon had not just trusted me, he had built the entire safeguard around me, knowing that anyone who wanted to bend his will would have to go through the one person he believed would never betray him. He had been right. I gathered the scrolls with trembling care, rolling them into a tight bundle and securing them under my cloak. Garrett tucked the runekeeper's testimony into an inner pocket, close to his heart. "We have to move," he said, "before someone notices." A faint scrape of stone above us cut him off. We froze. Another sound followed a muffled curse, the clink of armor, the unmistakable drag of boot on stair. More than one pair of boots. "Kale's men," Garrett breathed. His hand went to his sword. He must have felt the wards shift, or one of his spies saw us cross. "Can we seal it again?" I whispered. "Not in time." He looked at the narrow stair, then back at me. Calculation flashed across his face, swift and ruthless. I had seen that look before in battle councils, when Drakon and Garrett weighed which flank to sacrifice to save the whole line. "No," I said immediately. "Whatever you're thinking, no. We need you out," he replied, already moving. He shoved the lantern into my hands and guided me toward a smaller passage I had not noticed, half hidden behind a shelf. "Old ventilation shaft, too narrow for armored wolves. You can wriggle through. Once you're clear, the bond will let you close the vault from the other side. They'll think it was a fluke in the wards." "And you?" I demanded. "I will slow them down," he said. "Give you the steps you need." "They will kill you," I hissed. A brief, fierce smile touched his mouth. "They have been trying. Let's not make it easy for them." The boots were closer now, voices echoing down the stone. I heard Kale's name hissed like a warning, and another wolf answered. "He said they'd come. Orders are to take them alive if possible. The council wants a trial." Trial. The word made my skin crawl. There would be no justice in a trial Kale controlled. Garrett gripped my shoulders, forcing my gaze to meet his. "Amira, listen. We did not come this far to die in a hole with the truth in your hands and no one to speak it. You are the heir. The alpha. Drakon chose you. If one of us must be caught, it will be me." Terror fought with fury inside my chest. "I will not leave you. You must," he said, voice low and urgent. "If they catch us both, Kale burns the decree, kills us, and rules unchallenged. If they catch only me, he still has to explain why his beta disappears into a place only the alpha or his heir may enter." The logic was brutal and unanswerable. I hated it. I understood it. Garrett. He did not let me finish. Instead, he pulled me into a brief, crushing embrace, the kind I had seen him give Drakon before battle, when words were useless, and only contact could carry the weight of what might be lost. "For what it's worth," he murmured. He chose well. The footsteps reached the bottom of the main stair. "Go," he whispered, spinning me toward the narrow passage. "And when you stand in the circle and speak the truth, remember this. I followed you by choice." I crawled into the tight darkness, stones scraping my shoulders, the lantern held awkwardly ahead. Behind me, I heard the clang of steel leaving a scabbard, the rough bark of a challenge, and Garrett's voice ringing out a wolf who had spent his life obeying, now refusing to kneel. The passage twisted, then sloped upward. My lungs burned, my knees protested every inch, but I did not stop until a faint breath of night air brushed my face. I shoved aside a loose slab of rock and spilled out into the ruins above, coughing in the cold. The moon watched from behind tattered clouds. I pressed my wrist to the ground, to the stone, to the echo of the bond that still hummed in the earth, and willed the vault to close. Somewhere beneath my palms, the wards answered, runes flaring, then dimming as the stone sealed once more, cutting off the shouts and clash of steel below. Silence settled, heavy and complete. Garrett was gone, lost below to Kale's guards, to chains, to whatever sentence a frightened king would craft for a loyal wolf turned inconvenient. But in my cloak, the truth lay warm and solid and undeniable. The time for shadows had ended. Kale had his prisoner, and I had his undoing. The summons went out on heavy parchment and hushed breath. By invoking the right of challenge, I had done what no Luna had dared in generations. Tradition bound Kale's hands tighter than any chain, forcing him to answer the call before witnesses he did not choose, under a moon he could not command. He arrived at the great stone circle with an honor guard at his back and a sneer on his mouth, cloak sweeping the ground like spilled ink. I came with nothing but the truth and the weight of Drakon's name. The circle lay in the oldest part of Silvercrest, rough stones set in a ring on a hilltop, worn by centuries of paws and oaths. Above us, the full moon hung low and heavy, casting every face in silver. Around the edges, alphas from neighboring packs took their places, their crests stitched bright against dark cloaks. Some watched Kale with calculation, others with thinly veiled doubt. All had respected Drakon. None had expected to be called to judge his brother. The elders of Silvercrest's council sat in their carved seats along the eastern curve of the circle, backs rigid, expressions carved from stone. I could almost taste their unease in the air. They had spent moons telling the world I was mad, barren, gone. Yet here I was, standing on sacred ground, their own laws declared could not be denied to a challenger. The first howl was ceremonial, a long, rising note from the throat of the oldest neutral alpha present. It called the gathering to order, binding us to truth or to the consequences of refusing it. By ancient law, he intoned when the echoes faded, the right of challenge has been invoked. Let those who claim authority speak, and let those who carry proof be heard. Kale stepped forward first, of course. My lords, he began, voice smooth as oiled leather. We gather because grief has taken a cruel shape. My brother's widow cannot accept his passing. She would drag us all through mud and blood rather than let the pack heal. He spoke of duty, of bloodline, of the need for a strong male alpha in these dangerous times. He painted himself as the reluctant ruler, burdened by responsibility, forced to act when I abandoned my place. He called Garrett a traitor, claimed the beta had been ensnared by misplaced loyalty to a broken Luna. He did not mention the vault. He did not mention the decree he pretended did not exist. When he finished, polite murmurs rippled through some parts of the circle. Others remained silent, eyes flat. They were waiting to see if I would flinch. I did not. When the neutral alpha's gaze turned to me, I stepped into the center of the circle, feeling the rough stone beneath my boots, the cool weight of Draken's cuff around my wrist, the faint pulse of the mate bond scar under my skin. I am Amira, I said, letting my voice carry. Mate to Alpha King Draken of Silvercrest, banished at his grave without trial, accused of curses planted by others, declared dead so my absence would not trouble their conscience. Marin was the first to stand at my back. The old healer walked with a cane now, but her voice held steady as she described the hunting grounds, the poisoned soil, the reports she had written and been ordered to destroy. How Counselor Varen had signed the findings, then blamed the blight on my supposed barrenness. How she had refused to burn the records of my mating, knowing Draken would never have wanted our bond erased. I witnessed the right of chosen succession, she said, lifting a shaking hand. I signed his decree in the vault. When I objected to the council's claim that KL alone had right to the throne, they removed me from my post and sent me to tend distant outposts. They wished me forgotten. Then came the wolves from the border patrol. One by one, those who had survived that final ride stepped into the circle. They described the day Drakon died, the way Kale had argued to remain behind, then appeared halfway through the patrol with an excuse about urgent council business. How the ambush had sprung from both sides of the ridge, rogues and steel together. How Draken had gone down buying them time to escape. How Kale had reappeared only after the fighting ended, asking first who still lived, and only then where his brother lay. It was no wild attack, one warrior said bluntly. It was arranged. Someone knew our route. Someone wanted the king exposed. The council shifted in their seats, discomfort visible now. Twice, they tried to interrupt on points of procedure, claiming the testimony was emotionally compromised or speculative. Each time, an allied alpha raised a hand and cut them off. We did not ride here to listen to clever phrases, said the alpha of the Stonefall pack, an old friend of Draken's. We came for truth. Let the wolves who bled speak. When it was Garrett's turn, the guards brought him in chained. He had lost weight in Kale's cells, bruises blooming like shadows along his jaw and ribs, but his spine was unbowed. He knelt only when required by law, and even then it looked more like readiness than submission. With calm precision, he recounted what he had seen upon returning from the mission that had conveniently taken him far from the ridge, the empty throne room. My scent gone from the hall. Kale on the throne with the council at his back, the order to present himself for questioning that felt more like an accusation waiting for a crime. He feared what I might ask, Garrett said quietly. So he tried to send me where questions are buried. When that failed, he sent wolves loyal to him to hunt me. They called it rogue cleanup. I call it trying to silence the last voice Drakon trusted. Finally, I unrolled the sealed scroll. Silence fell like snowfall when Draken's crest gleamed in the moonlight. Every alpha there knew what it meant to tamper with a sealed decree. Even KL's most ambitious allies shifted uneasily. I held the parchment carefully, as if it were my mate's own hand. This, I said, is the will of the Alpha you all respected, witnessed by your own elders, locked in a vault only his heir could open. I read the decree slowly, giving each word room to land. When I reached the lines naming me as his successor above bloodline, above counsel, above ambition, a murmur rolled around the circle like distant thunder. Some faces showed shock, others, grim satisfaction. A few, thinly veiled fury. Then I read the Runekeeper's testimony, confirming that Drakon had bound the vault seal to my mate bond mark, making it impossible for anyone but me to open. This was his safeguard, I said. He knew someone would try to twist the law after his death. He did not trust bloodline alone, he trusted bond. The council tried one last time. Old laws, Varen sniffed. Rights no one honors anymore. The world has changed. The law has not, snapped the Stonefall Alpha. You accepted it when it crowned Drakon. You do not get to discard it because you prefer his brother. Kale had been silent through most of this, jaw clenched so tight I half expected his teeth to crack. At last, the restraint snapped. This is madness, he exploded, stepping into the center of the circle. Pack law was written by males who understood power. Do you truly think they meant for Aluna, a mate without an heir to sit where kings have sat? This right is an old superstition, dredged up by a widow who cannot accept her place. He pointed at me, hand shaking with anger. She is barren. She failed Drakon's line. Now she would claim his throne? If we let this stand, what next? Omegas leading warbands? Pups rewriting treaties? His words hung in the cold air. In another time, in another circle, they might have landed true. But the wolves gathered there had seen too much. They had watched Kael starve his people while blaming it on a curse. They had seen him flog servants for small mistakes, send loyal wolves to die in convenient accidents, cling to the throne with both hands while calling it duty. They had heard the stone-hard conviction in Marin's voice, the quiet grief in the border warriors, the flat certainty in Garrett's. Now they looked at Kael and saw not strength, but fear. When my turn came to speak, I did not shout. Rage would only echo his. I did not invoke this right because I crave a crown, I said. Exile taught me to live without one. I scrubbed floors. I slept in hay. I learned that leadership is not the weight of a circlet, but the weight of those who look to you when they are hungry and afraid. I turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as I could. Kael says I am barren, I continued. Perhaps I am. The moon chooses her own timing. But Drakon did not love me for the pups I might give him. He loved me for the wolf I already was. When he invoked the right of chosen succession, he was not discarding tradition. He was returning to its oldest root, that strength is proven, not inherited. That bond is more than blood. I let my gaze rest on Kael then, not with hatred, but with something colder. Kael did not only steal a throne, I said softly. He betrayed his own brother, corrupted the council, and used lies to pit our people against one another. He poisoned hunting grounds and called it curse. He took the grief of a pack and twisted it into a weapon. The mate bond scar pulsed faintly beneath my skin. I laid my hand over it. Drakon taught me that strength without wisdom is tyranny, I said, and wisdom without courage is surrender. I loved a male who tried every day to walk the path between. I stand here not to wear his shadow, but to finish what he began. A pack where law protects the weak as fiercely as it empowers the strong. When I finished, the circle was quiet. The neutral Alpha rose. The challenge has been made, he said. The evidence has been presented. The right has been invoked. We will deliberate. The elders and visiting Alphas withdrew to the edge of the hill, voices low and urgent. The rest of us waited in the cold, the full moon climbing higher. Kael paced like a caged wolf, throwing me looks that promised ruin if he won. Garrett knelt beside Marin, chains clinking softly as she pressed a healing salve into the bruises on his wrists. Time stretched, thin and brittle. At last, the elders returned. The neutral Alpha stepped back into the circle, his face unreadable. By consensus of the Great Council, he said, voice ringing in the clear air, Kael's claim to the Silvercrest throne is found lacking in lawful foundation. His succession is declared fraudulent, resting on concealed evidence, silenced witnesses, and deliberate manipulation of pack law. The right of chosen succession invoked by Alpha Drakon is deemed valid. By his decree and by ancient right, Amira, his mate, is recognized as rightful alpha of Silvercrest. The words hit like thunder. My knees wobbled. The mate bond scar burned hot, then cold, as if something long frozen had finally exhaled. Further, the alpha continued, counselors who aided in this deception are stripped of rank and barred from holding office in any allied pack. Their fate within Silvercrest lies with its rightful alpha. Garrett, beta to Dracon, is absolved of all charges and honored for his loyalty. Chains fell from Garrett's wrists with a clatter that sounded to me like the opening of a gate. Kael lunged forward, eyes wild. "You cannot do this. She will lead you to ruin." "Enough," the Stonefall Alpha snapped. "You have spoken lies long enough. Sit, or we will bind you as we would any rogue who threatens the circle." He stopped. Not because he feared them, I think, but because he finally understood. There was no one left to stand at his back. The council he had trusted had been exposed. The guards who had once moved at his gesture now wavered, sent sharp with confusion and uncertainty. A few took an involuntary step toward me instead. For the first time, Kael looked small. The neutral Alpha turned to me and bowed his head, just enough to acknowledge the shift. "Alpha Amira," he said, "Silvercrest awaits your judgment." I did not smile. There was nothing to celebrate yet. Wounds as deep as ours did not heal with a single sentence, no matter how just. But I lifted my head and stepped fully into the center of the circle, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes and one absent presence at my back. "Then let them hear it," I said. I did not walk into the Great Hall alone. When I crossed its threshold as Alpha for the first time, I carried Dracon's cuff on my wrist, Garrett at my right, Marin at my left, and the eyes of a wounded pack on my back. The throne loomed at the far end of the chamber, high-backed, carved with snarling wolves, built to make whoever sat upon it seem larger than life. Kael had loved that seat. I did not. I stopped halfway up the steps and turned instead toward the smaller door that led to the chambers Dracon and I had shared. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Alpha?" one of the guards ventured. "I will use the throne when ceremony demands it," I said, without slowing. "But I will sleep where I remember who I am." Our rooms were dustier than I remembered, but untouched. The maps Dracon had studiously pored over still covered the table, marked with notes in his tight, precise hand. The cloak he had worn on cold patrols hung from its peg, faintly scented with pine and smoke. For a moment, grief pressed so hard against my ribs I could not breathe. Then I laid my palm flat on the map table. "We begin here," I murmured. Not with what was taken, but with what must be rebuilt. The changes came in waves, not storms. First, I called the remaining council members into the light of the Great Hall and read out the Great Council's judgment. Those who had orchestrated my banishment and Dracon's erasure were stripped of rank, their crests cut cleanly from their cloaks. When one of Kael's loudest supporters fell to his knees, begging for mercy and babbling about loyalty, misplaced but sincere, whispers of execution rustled through the watching crowd. I let the noise swell, then raised my hand. "Justice is not vengeance," I said. "If I spill blood for the pleasure of it, I become what I fought. You will not die for the pack you betrayed. You will serve it." I sent them to the borderlands' hard posts where winters bite and rogues press, where every choice matters. Under watchful commanders loyal to Dracon's memory, they would defend the territory they had tried to sell with lies. If they wanted their names restored, they would earn it one patrol, one scar, one act of courage at a time. Some called that mercy, others called it cruelty, I called it balance. Next, I rewrote the laws that had once been used as weapons against me. We carved new clauses into pack law, literally, into stone, declaring that widowed mates, regardless of gender, could not be cast out without formal trial and clear proof of treason. Succession was amended to recognize the right of chosen succession alongside bloodline. Any alpha could, under witness, name a mate or proven wolf as heir, if no pup of their body lived to claim the seat. No more would the council hide behind tradition when what they truly followed was convenience. Council sessions themselves changed. No longer held behind closed doors with decisions handed down like edicts, they opened with public hearings where omegas, hunters, healers, and even pups, old enough to stand still for a few minutes, could listen. Summaries of every major decision were posted in the square. If a law could not withstand sunlight, it did not deserve to stand at all. Some days I missed the quiet anonymity of the broken antler. There, my world had been no larger than a tray, a broom, and the next tankard in need of scrubbing. Here, every choice rippled outward. On the first morning I formally named my beta, the hall was packed. Garrett knelt on the stone, head bowed, fist over his heart. "You served my mate until his last breath," I said. "You searched half the world when I was lost. You bled for a pack that hunted you. You could have bowed to Kale and been safe. You chose instead to stand alone with the truth." I drew him to his feet. "I will not let you stand alone again. Garrett Silvercrest, will you serve as my second?" His answer was quiet but unwavering. "Until my last breath, Alpha." The cheer that rose from the gathered wolves felt different from the ones I had heard in Draken's time. Then, they had cheered a legend. Now, they cheered a promise. I did not forget the ones who had no voices in those halls. The sanctuary Draken had built for orphaned pups became the heart of something larger. We expanded its walls, opened its doors, and renamed it the Luna's Sanctuary. Not in memory of my lost title, but in honor of all who had been cast out unjustly. Runaways from cruel packs. Omegas punished for refusing a bond. Wolves who had been left behind in wars and never reclaimed. They came wary and thin, expecting judgment. They found work, training, healing, and a leader who remembered what it felt like to sleep in hay and pretend it was enough. "You are not broken because someone threw you away," I told them. "You are proof that their judgment was flawed." When time allowed, I rode beyond Silvercrest. I went back to the Broken Antler with only 2 guards and no heralds, wearing a simple cloak instead of my alpha regalia. The tavern looked almost the same scarred counter, the same smoke-stained rafters, but the roof no longer leaked, and the shutters were new. The keeper squinted at me for a long moment, then huffed. "You always did wipe a table like it insulted you," he said. "Figured you'd end up important somewhere." I smiled and placed a heavy pouch of coin on the counter. For the roof that sheltered me when my own pack would not. For the bread that kept me from stealing. For the quiet. He eyed the pouch, then pushed half of it back. "We're square," he muttered. "Use the rest for those who come after you." "I intend to," I said. On the anniversary of Dracon's death, I climbed alone to the burial stones. No guard followed me. No counsel awaited. The wind tugged at my hair, cold and clean. I traced the carved letters of his name with my fingers, feeling the grooves worn deeper by my visits. I honored it, I told the stone, the sky, the memory bound into my bones. The trust you placed in me, the bond you believed in. My throat tightened, but the tears that slipped free were gentler now, shaped more by gratitude than raw pain. "You once asked me to rise because you could see a strength I did not. I have found it. Not all at once. Not without falling, but I am standing." I rested my wrist on the top of the stone so the moonlight caught the silver cuff and the scar beneath. "I will never be the alpha you were," I said. "I do not want to be. I am the alpha you believed I could become instead." When I returned to the hall that night, I did not go straight to my chamber. I walked the border first with a small patrol, listening to their worries about early frosts and strange tracks. I sat in the kitchens with the cooks, tasting the season's first stew. I stopped in the Omega quarters, where a young she-wolf tugged at my sleeve to tell me her pup had finally learned to shift without pain. Only when all of that was done did I climb the stairs to the balcony where Drakon and I had once watched constellations. The pack below moved through its rhythms, laughter, argument, song, not unscarred. Never that, but healing. I wore my mate bond mark visible now, the cuff pushed back, so silver and scar both caught the light. Once, I had hidden it in shame, a reminder of what I had lost. Now, it was something else. A promise etched in flesh that love given freely is more powerful than power taken by force. Bond over blood, choice over fear. I had been Luna. I was now Alpha. Both truths lived in me. I led with the fierceness Draken had honed in war and the compassion exile had carved into my heart. I chose meaning over dominance, partnership over isolation. In doing so, I did more than reclaim a throne. I completed the legacy my mate had died, protecting not a kingdom ruled through fear and blood, but a pack led by a wolf forged in loss and proven, again and again, through loyalty. If you have listened this far, tell me where in the world are you hearing my story from, and which moment cut deepest or shone brightest for you? Have you ever faced rejection that tried to tell you who you were, not only to claw your way back to who you truly are?